She gave a crippled beggar her only food, and her stepmother beat her for it. 3 weeks later, 12 men in black SUVs pulled into their compound, and they were looking for her. Before we dive into the full story, make sure you have subscribed to this channel and turned on notifications so you never miss a story like this one. In Onitsha, there's a saying, the old women pass it between themselves like something too heavy for one person to carry alone. The hand that gives in hunger will never close empty. 14-year-old Amara had had it her whole life. She had never once seen it proven. Her name meant grace, which was the cruelest kind of irony, because grace was the one thing her life had never been given. Her mother died when she was 4. Her father remarried 2 years later. His new wife, Patricia, arrived with pressed lace blouses, expensive perfume, and 2 of her own children. And from the first morning, it was clear which children would eat first in that house and which would wait. Amara waited. She cooked. She cleaned. She fetched water before school and washed dishes after dark. She was not the kind of girl who made noise about her suffering. She had learned early that noise only brings more trouble down on you. Her father was not a bad man. He was something worse, an absent one. His transport business kept him on the road between Onitsha and Lagos for weeks at a time. And when he came home, Patricia had already arranged the version of events he would hear. So he came home to a peaceful house and a grateful wife and daughters who smiled at him, and he saw what he was shown and believed what was convenient. Amara survived by making herself small. She was good at it. She had been practicing since she was 6. He appeared one Monday morning in late March at the junction near the Ike Auka market. Nobody knew where he came from. He was simply there, the way poverty appears in places, suddenly and without explanation. He sat on a flattened cardboard box beneath the concrete lip of the footbridge, one leg twisted inward at an angle that made people look away. A metal crutch lay beside him like a sleeping companion. He held a dented tin cup. He did not beg aggressively the way some men did, calling out, tugging sleeves, following people 3 steps beyond where they wanted to be followed. He simply sat, and the cup sat with him. And if God brought something, something came. God, by the accounting of the Ike Auka market, brought very little. Traders chased him away from their stalls. A woman threw a bag of spoiled tomatoes at him, not to give, but to move him. Boys from the area mocked his twisted leg, walking behind him in exaggerated imitation until he had rounded the corner. The Okada men called him a bad omen. The market women held their handbags tighter when they passed. Nobody sat with him. Nobody looked at him the way you look at a person. Amara saw him on a Wednesday. She was returning from school, carrying the food flask her stepmother had given her that morning, a half portion of leftover eba, a scraping of egusi soup with no meat, the daily reminder of her place in the household. She had been looking forward to it for 6 hours, the way hungry people carry small meals in their minds like promises. She stopped when she saw him. The man's tin cup was empty. His head was bowed. In the slant of the afternoon sun, he looked like something the world had decided to forget. She stood there for a long time, longer than made sense, long enough for a minibus to stop and start, and a goat to cross the road ahead of her, and a woman to pass with a basin of stockfish on her head. Then she walked to him and set the flask down in front of him. He looked up. His eyes were extraordinary, dark and very calm, the way the surface of deep water is calm, still on top, but containing enormous depth below. "Eat," she said simply. "I will find something at home." She would not find something at home. She knew this. Patricia's kitchen was measured precisely, every ladle, every cup of rice accounted for. There would be no extra food, and asking for any would only produce a lecture about ungrateful children and wasted charity. She walked home hungry. She almost made it. If she had come in through the back, if she had gone directly to her room, if Patricia had been occupied with her phone or her television, perhaps the flask would not have been noticed until morning. But Patricia was standing in the parlor when Amara entered, and the first thing she noticed was the absence of the flask. The interrogation was swift, and the conclusion was swifter. When Amara admitted she had given the food to a beggar at the junction, Patricia's face went through several expressions before settling on the one Amara feared most. Not anger, but a cold, satisfied fury, the kind that had been waiting for exactly this kind of occasion. What followed was not discipline, it was demonstration. Patricia hit her with an electric extension cord 3 times across the back, each stroke measured and deliberate. She made Amara kneel on the kitchen floor while she listed at length and with considerable creativity every way in which Amara was a burden, a disgrace, and a symbol of her dead mother's failed raising. Amara's 2 stepsisters watched from the doorway and said nothing. The neighbors heard and closed their windows. That night, Amara ate nothing. She lay on her mat in the small room beside the kitchen and pressed her hand against the welt on her back and stared at the ceiling and did not cry. Not because she wasn't in pain, but because she had learned that tears, like noise, only brought more attention to a wound. She had done what felt right. She wasn't sure it was enough to survive on, but it was all she had. She did not know that 3 weeks from that night, everything in her life would change so completely that she would struggle to remember what the ceiling of that room had looked like. They came on a Thursday morning. 12 vehicles, all black, all clean in the particular way that expensive things are clean, a cleanliness that announces itself without apology. They moved in convoy through the narrow streets of the neighborhood with the slow setting authority of people who have never once worried about where they were going. They stopped at the compound of Emmanuel Chukwemeka. Patricia had the engines first. She smoothened her blouse. She called to her daughters to tidy the parlor. She composed her face into its receiving visitors configuration. The man who stepped out of the lead vehicle was not the beggar. He was tall, clean-shaven, dressed in a charcoal grey agbada that moved with the quiet authority of excellent tailoring. His shoes were the kind you did not see in Onitsha, except on the feet of senators and chief executives. He wore no jewelry except a single watch that caught the light with the restrained glow of something serious. Behind him came lawyers, assistants, a woman with a tablet typing before she had finished stepping out of the vehicle. Patricia met them at the gate with her best smile. The man looked past her. "I am looking for a girl named Amara." His name was Chief Gerald Obiora, 61 years old, founder of 3 companies, majority shareholder in a 4th, and the quiet 4th behind a foundation that had built schools in 11 states across Nigeria. He was, by any reasonable measure, one of the 50 most powerful private citizens in the country. He was also the man who had been sitting under the Ike-Aoka bridge with a dented tin cup. He told the story himself, standing in the compound in front of Patricia, whose smile had slowly stopped working. He had been doing it for 7 years, the testing, he called it. Not performance, not theater, a genuine private practice that had come from a moment of spiritual crisis after his first company failed and a stranger on a roadside in Aba had shared a meal with him without being asked. He wanted to know whether that kind of generosity still existed in people, whether generosity survived poverty, whether a person with nothing could still give. He had gone to 12 different markets in 6 cities over 7 years. In 11 of them, he had been mocked, chased away, ignored, and in one memorable incident in Aba, cold water was thrown on him. In Onitsha, on a Wednesday afternoon in March, a 14-year-old girl in a fraying school uniform and a worn school shoes had set down her only food in front of him, said "eat," and walked away. He had watched her go. He had sat with the flask of eba and egusi and not eaten it immediately, just looked at it for a long time. This small, already cold meal that represented everything the girl had for the rest of that day, given freely, without any expectation of return. He made a phone call. Then he waited 3 weeks, because a man like Chief Obiora did not act on impulse. He had people investigate. He learned about the mother who died, the father who was always traveling, the stepmother and the cord and the kneeling and the neighbors who closed their windows. He learned everything, and then he came. He spoke for 20 minutes in that compound. He spoke about a full scholarship, not to the government secondary school, but to a private institution in Abuja with a boarding program and a waiting list 2 years long. He spoke about a trust fund, modest but real, that would sit in Amara's name until she turned 18. He spoke about his foundation's mentorship program, the women who had come through it and where they were now. He did not speak to Patricia. He spoke to Amara, who stood in the corner of the compound in her school uniform. The same fraying uniform, the same worn shoes. She looked at this man with extraordinarily calm eyes and understood slowly that the ground beneath her life was shifting. Patricia tried to speak twice. Both times, the tall lawyer beside Chief Obiora turned toward her with a look so professionally empty that the words died in her mouth. Amara's father, reached by phone in Lagos, came home the next morning. He sat with Chief Obiora for 3 hours. He came out of that meeting a man who had seen himself clearly, perhaps for the first time in years, and the reflection had not been comfortable. What happened to Patricia after that is a longer story, and it is not Amara's story to carry. Amara graduated top of her class 4 years later. She studied economics, then law, then she came back, not just to Onitsha, but to the whole region. She spent 11 years working with the very foundation that had changed her life, building programs for girls in situations identical to the one she had survived. She kept one thing from her old life: a small, dented tin cup, the one Chief Obiora had left behind under the bridge. She had gone back and retrieved it the day after everything changed. She was not entirely sure why. She kept it on her desk wherever she worked. People asked about it sometimes. She always gave the same answer. It reminds me that what looked like nothing was actually everything, and that the people the world treats as invisible are usually the ones worth seeing most. In Onitsha, the old women still pass that saying between themselves, like something too heavy for one person to carry alone. The hand that gives in hunger will never close empty. Amara Chukwuemeke is living proof. And every meal she ever shared after that first one, she gave with the full knowledge of what giving, even from emptiness, is capable of returning. If you felt something listening to this story, support this channel by subscribing. It helps me bring more stories like this to you.